these sponsors.
لو جيت في يوم ارسمك ارسم امل بسام ونرسم حضاره ومدن
Welcome to your weekly program, BelAhdan, the show that brings the Egyptian revolution to your living room. Today, January 25th, and this is 12 months ago, Egyptian toppled 30 years of dictatorship. 18 million people showed up in the streets in the Tahrir Square. 12 months later, they still in the street. Millions of people poured on the streets in Tahrir Square today, demanding the same demand that they had 12 months ago, was toppling the military and Tantawi's military. What happened in the last 12 months? Do we have a revolution, or the revolutions still continue? The people who went to Tahrir Square, some of them celebrating the end of the revolution, and the majority of them were demanding for the revolution to continue and achieve its demands. We have here today Professor Ahmed Samatar. He's in the Makausar. He's watching the events very closely, and we're going to talk about the Egyptian revolutions 12 months later. Welcome to BelAhdan.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for coming. I'm looking at what's going on today. I'm watching, it's starting at like 4 o'clock in the morning our time. Now today is 12 o'clock, 12:30. So it's 8 o'clock in Egypt, and it's still going. Millions of people are still on the streets, and it looks like 2011. So looking at the Egyptian revolutions, as far as we go, is this a revolution? How you compare it to the other revolution? Did it succeed? What's going on? Why is it still going and people demanding the same thing they went for it 12 months ago?
Well, it certainly has some of the characteristics of a major historical change. So if you define revolution in that sense, that certainly has the semblance of that. But it's not a complete revolution yet. I would argue that still a peak of the crisis is still going on. Revolutions really are not the beginning of the moment of change. Revolutions are the end of change. That's to say, when a particular idea becomes victorious, and the old order is totally cleaned out, and a new one is put in its place, then we can call that a revolutionary change. I think what we have now is a process of historical transformation, which has the semblance of revolutionary processes, but not quite yet finalized. And that's why you have people still in the streets demanding the completion of the process of transformation.
Who decided if the revolution ended or is still going? I mean, you're talking about the people who started the revolution, the youth and all that. And these are people still in the street. But the majority of Egyptians, it seems like, they are kind of had enough. And so who decided? Certain groups, certain power, or certain ideas?
Revolutions, if you study them historically, I think one will find out that they have two levels. And the first level is almost like the engine of the historical process. It's a relatively small group of people. They come perhaps from different walks of life, mostly intellectuals and highly educated people. They produce the ideas, and they produce the steam that moves forward the process of change. But that cannot go fully unless it is coupled with mass mobilization. So these are the two levels of the revolutionary process. And when the two come together and hook up together rather nicely, then you really have a fundamental change in the system itself, the economic system, political system, the cultural system, and the institutions of the society. Egypt, therefore, I think is still in the process of working that through.
What's going on in Egypt? It seems like the part of changing, people transform, they broke the fear barrier, which is huge. And people are kind of expressing their opinion. We have people assembly. But the institution, the new institution, military institution, is CAF. It seems like doing the same thing that Mubarak was doing.
Yeah. Well, that's why I said revolutionaries, when the word revolution connotes the end of the process, the triumph of the new order. And that hasn't taken place yet in Egypt. Many of the remnants of the old order under President Mubarak still survives. And not only survives, in fact, dominates certain walks of life, including the state itself, the government itself. So in that sense, it is very important for people to note that old orders do not just die like that rather quickly. They drag on. And sometimes, in fact, they return. This is called the Thermidorian reaction. So they could return unless the process worked out the whole system through, and you therefore have institutional change at the level of not only politics, but at the level of politics, at the level of culture, at the level of economic life. Well, maybe one of the most critical elements in a revolutionary process is that the economic nature of that society goes through some very significant, discernible change. We yet have to see that, I think, in Egypt.
But it seems like the people who go to Tahrir and demonstrate, that you don't see that economic demands out there. It's mostly dignity and mostly want a new Egypt, mostly kind of political and demands. Where is the economic factor there?
Yeah. Well, dignity is very important, and it is one of the great drivers of human emancipation. But there is a close link between that and the material life itself. And I think if you have a deep historical change, this is when the average people, whether it's the peasants or the working classes and others, people who are grounded in the material production of life, become very instrumental in the historical change. Then the economic moment begins to become supreme. Great revolutions, therefore, are class revolutions. In Egypt, I think that is still in progress. And I haven't really seen too much of the Egyptian people working in the land, for example, or working in great factories. This is significant industrial process in Egypt. I haven't seen those very visible in the shouting for a new order yet. But I have a sense that still, even among the middle classes and some of the upper classes, there is a sense that university students, for example, that economic realities are quite problematic. Many of them do not have jobs, young people who have no jobs. So there is an economic moment in there, but I don't think it has burst into the foreground of the historical change yet.
Well, that's why probably they are on the street. They don't have jobs.
Perhaps, yes.
No, but you know, when you compare what's happening in Egypt as opposed to Tunisia, which is part of the whole deal, and now you find out the Tunisian president is far left, the parliament Islamist, and you know, it's a totally different history and different dynamic. Compare, or how does the Egyptian revolution fare within the rest of the Arab Spring?
Well, the Tunisian historical change or revolution, certainly the change of regime, and it's still kind of a political change, is significant in the sense that it was the great spark that began to give people in other parts of the Arab and Islamic world, but particularly the Arab world, that a new order is possible. And therefore, it emboldened people to come to the streets and demand that the dictatorships will have to come to an end. The significance of the Egyptian revolution is the weight of Egypt itself. This is the largest country in terms of population, well over 80 million people, one of the deepest civilizations in the whole area, highly educated classes, and to a certain extent where Egypt goes, the rest of the Arab world might go. And it is that weight, therefore, that becomes important if the historical change that is now in motion begins to become victorious in the end.
How does, you know, for all these years, talking about the Americans' relationship with the Middle East and area, and I mean, it's been historically, Americans are uh, kind of dealing with a client, a dictator of some sort, and now they have to deal with a whole population. So how does the Arab Spring changing the dynamic of international relationships, particularly relationship with the United States and Israel and all things for the Americans that wants to find out? Yeah.
Right. Well, the Arab Spring, I think, has given new ideas to many people around the world that the unthinkable is now thinkable. And you can confront dictatorships and personalistic regimes frontally and demand that they go away and the change takes place. So in that sense, the Arab Spring is a major contribution to the changing politics of the 21st century. In regard to the United States, as I said in your program, I think a few months back, United States is not just one element. There are dimensions to the United States. I have often argued that there are two Americas. It's like a Janus-faced creature with two faces. There is an America that is democratic, that would like to spread that democracy in a real sense and share the fruits of democratic, liberal, progressive society and principles with other societies. That's good, and I think those Americans who are part of that phase congratulated what is happening in Egypt and Tunisia and Libya and other parts of the Arab world. But then there's the other side of the United States that is heavily imperialistic, to a certain extent very racist, that really doesn't give a damn, so as to speak, about what happens in the rest of the world, as long as how these particular groups define American national interests are kept. And in that sense, therefore, they would rather prefer that a client dictator stays on top of the society as long as he or she is able to facilitate American national interests. These are the two Americas, and they are often in contest. As we watch the United States now coming into these elections in 2012, you can hear both voices from different parts of the American political spectrum.
It's interesting that Obama on the eve of January 25th is demanding a federal investigation of Wall Street.
Yes.
It's almost a reverse, the people demand the toppling of the dictator.
Yes.
In the president, which a dictator in one sense, demanding the toppling of the system.
Yeah.
But, I want to give the audience a chance here, but one last question about the sweeping of the Islamic and Muslim Brotherhood, not just in Egypt, in Tunisia, and Jordan, Morocco, and everything else. Is this any different than the religious movement and trends? We have also the evangelical right wing and American Taliban and all those is a very strong and also affecting election. What is the connection?
Well, religion, I think, is a very important element in human existence, in the sense that it gives a certain depth to the meaning of life, and in fact, even the world beyond this life, the divine. So that's important, and it gives a certain weight to human place in the cosmos. But the challenge for all religions, and particularly Islamic societies, is whether Somali Islamic peoples are able to, at one level, hold on to their religion and revive the best of that religion, and at the same time create democratic societies. I mean, democracy really is a very important concept if you are talking about the liberty and the dignity of the individual, men and women in society. And the relationship, therefore, between religious orthodoxy and democratic liberal politics is very problematic for Egypt, for Tunisia, for Morocco, for other parts of the Islamic world. This is the challenge, how they can synthesize Islamic principles and ethics and democratic constitutional life in which the independence and the liberty of the individual is sacrosanct. That's the challenge.
Let me go through my challenge here is giving the audience a chance to ask, this is a very nice treat for us. So Assam has the microphone here. Who's going to take the first question to Professor Samatar?
One of the most remarkable features of this uprising in Egypt was that shift of focus. The focus historically had been on an enemy outside Israel, America, and there was a lot of energy consumed by that. But seems like the energy within this recent uprising was totally focused within. How do you explain that shift?
I think the shift is primarily because of the weight and the effect of the dictatorship itself, joblessness among the young people, the absence of any kind of a democratic participation among the vast majority of the Egyptian people in the fate and designing of the fate of their own society. So I think the pressure and the durability of the dictatorship, when it became a family rule, really, has taken precedence over these other issues. But I will be very careful to make the point that international relations of Egypt are not put on in the outside. They are waiting to be dealt with, whether it is the Palestinian question, or even the relationship between Egypt and Israel, since they share a border, and what that relationship would be. And the great hegemony of the United States hasn't gone away. I mean, the Egyptians continue to collect whatever aid that they have been getting from the United States, particularly the military. So those questions are waiting. But the priority for now, I think, has been this past year at least, in how to challenge the structures of internal authority as the state gets increasingly transformed and changed.
You
previously mentioned that revolutions change the economic state of a country and its culture. Given previous revolutions like in Iran, what is your prediction for Egypt, for its culture and its economy and for its democracy?
Yeah. Predictions are very dangerous business, certainly for scholars. Only prophets might have the courage to speak about the future with a degree of certainty. Egypt is a very complex society. It's an ancient civilization. It has a very thick educated classes, including women. So one never knows where it would go. But I'm hoping, it's not a prediction, but it's a hope, that the Egyptian peoples will work out a new, and in fact a lesson also for the rest of the Arab and the Islamic world, in which, as I said before, there will be a synthetic relationship between the ethics of Islamic societies and Islamic faith. The ethics of the Islamic faith is a wonderful one if people have the capacity to live it, and at the same time create a democratic, open, liberal society in which the dignity of the individual is at the core of what defines the politics of that society. If we can get that, democratic politics and Islamic ethics, then the Egyptian people and the Muslim peoples might be able to pioneer a new historical time, both for Islamic peoples, but also lessons for the rest of the world to learn from the Egyptian society. But that's a hope, not a prediction.
But what about the Coptic population in Egypt? Given
Well, this is why I underscore the importance of democracy and the dignity of the individual. Egypt is also a pluralistic society, including religious pluralism. And one of the most important elements of democratic life is not the rule of majority as most people think. That's important. But the real secret of the value of democracy is the protection of the rights of the minorities. And this is the challenge there for the Egyptians, whether we will have now an Islamization that will ban and persecute and oppress others, or whether the majority of the Egyptians who are Muslims, as they come now to change their state, will become very faithful to democratic culture, and particularly the right and the dignity of minorities, whether they are religious or otherwise.
Well, do I have one here, another one? We're very blessed today. This is very special for us because we have a live audience. So
yes, well, it's
lucky.
very nice.
Okay,
And the questions are excellent.
So my question is more aside the fact of the revolution, more towards the fact of the trial that's currently going on with Hosni Mubarak. So I've been hearing a lot of controversy off of Twitter and other social networking websites. And what I've been hearing is that per the constitution of the Egyptian governments, currently they're saying that once a new president is elected, that then they will go ahead and basically released the trial and accusations of what's going on with Hosni Mubarak right now. Could you please kind of expand on the issue of the trial? What is the delay? That kind of things, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I think all of us, both in this life and the one after, ought to account for our actions. So that's important, that particularly someone who has ruled a country almost single-handedly for 30 years would have to account for their record. But it is also important the accounting of that record is done in civilized fashion. And it is not just a counterpoint to the pressure of the authoritarian regime before. Revolutions, if they are going to humanize and create a new historical moment, have to be more civilized also than the regimes that they have changed. You see, I'm one of those people who thought that bringing the old president, and rather old man really, over 80 years old and sick, bring him on a gurney to a prison and then having the world to see, I thought that was not dignified for the Egyptian people to do that. There's another way to do that, to make the accountability very clear.
We'll give him bed.
Yeah, but I think in the end though, it will be important test for the new revolutionary process and the Egyptian people and those who were demanding change, how they conduct the final process itself. But I am one of those people who would argue that President Mubarak would have to account for his record as a leader of the Egyptian society for nearly 30 years. And that was not always, everything was bad. I mean, there are some important good things that the regime has done if you look at the record very carefully. But many would argue that when you balance those two, the authoritarian nature and the way the Egyptian president and his regime have handled the state and dealt with the Egyptian people has got great deal to be accounted for.
But regardless, I mean, my personal feeling is that justice should always be served, regardless if they hear life or the life after.
Yes.
But the basis of my question is, what is kind of the next step of the trial? Because all that we kind of see is him coming on a bed or in a cage or something like that.
Yeah.
But more so, what are the next steps of the trial? Because it seems to just continue to get delayed.
I think trials, if they are real serious, and they are not kangaroo courts, are complicated and take significant amount of time, so that all the evidence from all sides, both the prosecution side and the defense side, are put on the table very clearly and argued in the court of law. So it is by its very nature a process that is very slow and very intricate, because it is full of debates and disputations. But I think in the end, my sense would be that if the revolution really has matured and the new leadership is different, that they will handle this well, and the president or the ex-president Mubarak will meet his fate, whatever that fate becomes according to the rules of the law of the society. My hope, though, is that I think the issue really is not Mubarak anymore, and the society should not be fixated on what becomes on Mubarak and how more you want to humiliate him. I think the challenge for the Egyptian society now is what happens to the future. What kind of Egypt do you want to create? And we're not sure about that. And the new political parties that now dominate the parliament, the Brotherhood and the Salafis, have a challenge in front of them. It is not enough to get drunk on the victory of the votes recently. The challenge is, what kind of a future do you offer for the Egyptian society? And it is pluralistic nature. That, I think, is the issue rather than Mubarak. Mubarak now is part of the past.
More question?
Hello. My question is, since the revolution is over, and it's been over, and before the revolution was over, there was already a lot of poverty going on, adoption centers, kids without homes, and now it's even getting worse. The situation is getting worse. What can we do to actually help these people get better lives, and are we actually trying to help these people? With all my respect to this show, is this show helping send money? Is it helping send a prophet over there to help the people? Or are we just doing this to get knowledge out?
When you say we, you mean Us or
Like the show itself, and
Our
all these
show?
other shows that are going on talking about this stuff. Is it
Oh, I
actually
see.
helping, or is
Our
it
show
just
is a non-profit organization.
or is it just a propaganda to talk about it more? Is it,
No, I'm
are we
sure.
actually helping? Are we actually getting these poor people better lives? Is money that we're sending actually getting to them? Is there
Well,
something coming out of this, or is
So
it
the
just-
question is to me,
Understanding.
right?
Yes, sir. It's sent
Yeah,
to you.
thank you, sir. Well, I didn't know the media's role is to raise funds. It's just we raise issues, we raise questions. This is our role, and I think an event like that it only happen every few hundred years needs to be covered, and that's why we have you here to ask questions to our guests. And I think I don't think the Egyptians' biggest problem is sending money. I mean, they have resources, they're very rich in resources, and I think they are.
There's a lot of people that don't have money.
I know.
Well, I think
Not because why we didn't send them money, because
right.
somebody's stealing it from
Right.
them,
I
and
think-
it wasn't us.
I think the answer from my point of view is a good one, but I think I'll add this.
Okay.
The single most important element in a culture and a society, so diverse like Egypt, or even this group here,
Okay.
is first to understand what the problem is. What's the question and what does that mean? So what we are engaged in, what the mass media are engaged in, what the universities do, what newspapers do, is first of all the search for what the critical questions are.
Okay.
And then how to understand them. And only when you have posed the critical questions and you have understood what they are, can you then talk about what can be done? And your question is, what can be done?
What can be done?
What can be
yes,
done?
Yes.
And the Egyptian people are in fact doing it. And what they are doing it is first of all the most significant thing of them all, and that is the change from one order, which was very repressive for over 30 years, to something different, in the hope that it will be, in my language, a democratic Egyptian society which underscores the liberty of individuals and the equality of men and women in the new change that's coming.
I respect what you're saying. I respect what you're
Thank you.
saying, but I think there's no progress going on whatsoever in Egypt since the revolution started.
I disagree with that. I think the very fact that the old president and his regime are under trial
Okay.
is a major
Yep.
epochal change
Yep.
in Egyptian society.
That's true. That's true. But if you go to Egypt now, I've been there 2 months ago, and I was there 2 years ago. Now the life in Egypt is even worse. Now there's more poverty. Now there's more stealings going on. Now there's more robberies. Now there's more.
Because you are in a moment of historical change, and when you are in a moment of historical change, the old order which held everything together is no more. The new order is yet to be born.
Okay.
So you are in a kind of a middle ground yet. And
Okay.
middle grounds are very vulnerable to all kinds of difficulties, including deterioration of the economy, deterioration of the security. But that's the very nature of the historical process that is moving to the future.
I want to also move to another phase on the show here. Thank you so much
If
for
I can
coming.
just say one more thing.
We only have 20 seconds, very quick.
I think that Obama does not care about Egypt, and America does not care about what's going on in Egypt.
Thank you, sir.
And they
I
are happy
appreciate
that
I think
people
you
are
made,
dying every day in Egypt.
I think
Thank
you.
you.
I think you have a point. Thank you so much. Thank you, Professor Samatar.
pleasure.
Thank
It's
you
a
for
pleasure.
him. Thank you all for coming here. Egypt Revolution 12 months later, and we'll see you next week. Assalamu alaikum, and God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you.
لو جيت في يوم ارسمك ارسم امل بس